Norway, population of roughly 5.4 million. That's roughly half of its neighbour Sweden, which contains 10.4 million. Yet Norway is consistently featured in the top 10 richest nations in the world, while Sweden usually features outside of it. So why exactly is such a small nation located in Northern Europe so rich? Norway recently came in fourth in terms of living standards and one of the countries with the highest life expectancy, 80 years for a man and 84 for a woman. An average salary for a man when converted to euros is above 5,000 euros a month, which equals roughly $5,600 a month. In addition, it's ranked the second lowest in a list of countries with the lowest level of corruption. Many believe that Norway was a relatively poor country until discovering oil and gas in the North Sea. This may be a slight misconception, however, as in the 19th century, Norway's wealth was, in fact, on par or slightly above average compared to the rest of Europe at the time. However, Norway was certainly behind its neighbours Sweden and Denmark until recently in terms of wealth. Before oil in the 1960s, Norway had an income some 10 to 20% below its neighbours Denmark and Sweden. Today, however, things are slightly different, with Norway's income now between 10 to 20% higher than its neighbours. Norway is currently the sixth richest country in the world when measured by GDP per capita. Norway's GDP per capita is around 69,000 according to the IMF estimates, and the World Bank scoring its GDP per capita at 89,000. As you can see with this graph, Norway's wealth has skyrocketed in the last 50 years to being one of the richest countries on Earth, while only holding 0.07% of the global population. So why is this? Many of you will have guessed by now, oil has played a pivotal role in Norway's wealth. About 30% of Norway's GDP comes from oil and gas industry. Norway exports iron, magnesium, titanium, and aluminium, as well as a complex fishing and woodworking network. The first major oil discovery was made the day before Christmas Eve in 1969. From the early 1970s, Norway started to develop its oil and gas production. From then on, Norway found much more oil reserves off the west coast of Norway. If you look at the map today, you can see hundreds of drilling sites off the west coast. From 1980 to 1999, oil and gas amounted to 18 to 25% of all exports. In 2000, it jumped to 45%, and has been between 40 to 75% of exports ever since. More recently, Norway has supplied between 20 to 25% of the European Union's and United Kingdom's gas demand. As you can see with this graph, Norway ranked third in net gas exports in 2021 compared to other gas exporting countries. Oil is important for three main reasons. Firstly, it has provided an important income to the Norwegian economy, both public and private. Secondly, it has provided export earnings that can pay for imports. Third, it has brought an entire industry that is very productive. However, it's not just directly through oil in which the average Norwegian gains wealth. Norway puts its oil revenues into the government pension fund, the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. In simple terms, the government pension fund or oil fund is a giant savings pot that makes its money by investing in more than 9,000 companies all over the globe. The bulk of the revenue from Norway's oil and gas production is kept in the sovereign wealth fund, which was created to keep the money for the Norwegian people and future generations. The fund, which has amassed 1 trillion since its inception in the 1990s, is a source of stability for the nation in times of economic instability, like most recently with the coronavirus pandemic. The fund is valued at over $1 trillion. Tiny Norway has only about 0.0% of the world's population, but their oil fund holds about 1.3% of the world's publicly listed investments. This wealth fund is an essential source of funding for the government, with around every fifth krona of government spending coming from the oil fund. Without the fund, the government would have to dramatically lower its spending or raise taxes across the board. Norway is the sixth happiest country on Earth according to the UN's World Happiness Report for 2021, thanks in part to its well-funded welfare, education and health systems, making it not just one of the wealthiest countries in the world, but also one of the happiest. I mean, how could you not be happy being surrounded by magical fjords and mountains, making a decent monthly income and have a great education and healthcare system? Only about 40% of Norway's estimated gas resources have been produced so far. Production level is expected to remain high for the next 10 to 15 years. If the most optimistic resource estimates prove to be correct, production figures will be higher than the current forecast. However, here comes a concern. Norway's oil production is expected to peak and then decline. This is concerning for a nation which heavily relies on oil exports. And being a country dedicated to fight climate change, a revamped oil production system will directly contradict those ideas. It is estimated that its oil production could unleash climate pollution 60 times greater than Norway's annual domestic emissions. However, whether you believe in climate change or not, the country does face a dilemma. Just recently, Norway's oil minister said that we need to make new discoveries. At this time, it seems as though Norway has not given up on its oil future, and understandably so. It would seem stupid to completely dismantle an industry worth 14% of its GDP. If they were to stop oil production, then they would have to find another industry to replace the 33% of its exports which are suddenly gone, this being 80% of government revenues. Even just now, the Norwegian government has allowed for further exploration in the Norwegian Sea and the Barents Sea for further exploration. The announcement for the licensing round will take place in the third quarter of this year, with the award of blocks expected to be announced in January 2024. Of course, Norway, being prudent with its oil money through its oil pension fund, does offset some of the loss if oil production is completely stopped. However, even the wealth fund has not been able to escape the current stock market correction. Norway's wealth fund posted a record loss of 1.64 trillion crowns for 2022, bringing to an end a 3-year run of soaring profits as stocks and bonds were hit by Ukraine war and inflation. Norway's oil fund chief warns of tough times ahead for investors. The 1.2 trillion fund suffered a 14.4% loss, or equivalent to 174 billion in the first half of last year, driven by a sell-off across all sectors except energy. However, oil has played a large part in development of Norway's economy. It isn't the sole reason Norway is so well off. Norway is rich today because of its well-educated labour force, productive public and private sectors, and rich natural resources. In addition to this, Norway can buy goods at lower prices from the international markets, such as garments, and sell goods at high prices, such as salmon. Norway is a success story when taking into effect its population size. However, there may be a day where its oil runs out. With its sovereign wealth fund showing signs of cracks, it may be a reason to be concerned.